Purchasing a local used car can be an extreme sport, especially if you're a first-time car buyer. You don't know where to start, what to check, how to check, maybe whom to contact. Welcome to 026 Motoring once again. My name is Bill Siotori, and in today's episode, I want to tell you how to buy a second-hand car or a locally used car. So if you are new to this channel, make sure you subscribe to this channel, and you can always check our social media platforms. That is a Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube if you want to learn a few things here and there about cars. Should you also want to purchase a car? Remember, we do scout clean cars, inspect them, and we also help you with delivery. So if you want to purchase a car, you can always reach out to us. We are going to make your car ownership journey easy. That is the goal of 0 to 60 Motoring. I normally say that there is a car for every budget. So it's very important to do market research and know what you're getting into. Someone can buy a Toyota Premium 260 2010 one at 750, and another one will buy it at 1 million. So the condition may not be similar. That's why I also tell people to be a little bit realistic with their demands. Because if you go for an extremely low priced car, there is a very huge probability that that car is not going to be in a good shape. So step number one, I normally say that once you have saved your money and it has reached that range for a car, have like 3 cars. Here online kutafuta gari, you will be surprised. Utaona terms like past owned, lady driven, only driven on weekends, maybe owner relocating, alafu tumiwe picha na videos. But I want to tell you that most probably the videos that you are going to see online may not necessarily reflect the true colors of the car. So kwa ground vitu ni different. So when you have reached the place where you want to check the car, of course you are going to start with the body condition of the car. There is this thing we normally call original paint. Someone may tell you a car has never been repainted, but maybe it has been repainted. So once you open the door, you can actually tell inside here. You can check inside here and see whether the car has been repainted. The color inside here should be what is on the outside. I've had cases whereby you go to check a car, unapata hapa ndani iko pink, iko blue, na maybe gari nje ni white, na mtu anakuambia the car is original paint. So unaangalia hapa ndani. Another thing you should check ni hizi corners hapa. Ukipata gari maybe ilianguka ikaroll, even if someone repairs it pretty well, they cannot repair it to factory perfection. So unaangalia hizi corners hapa kama zimejikunja hapa ndani kama wamejaribu kunyorosha mlango. So that is a thing you're going to check. So another thing that you can check to know whether a car is accident free, unaangalia hizi laini. Hii laini inakimbia kutoka hapa nyuma inanyooka hadi hapa mbele. This actually should be a straight line. You can also check up front, uangalie how the bonnet closes. For instance, if this lining here maybe space hapa ni kidogo, ya hapa chini maybe ni kubwa, inakuambia gari lilimwa mbele hawakunyoosha vizuri. You can also check the bumper alignment with the lights. That one can also give you a rough insight on how the car looks like when it comes to the body condition. So you can also open the hood of the car. Itakusaidia kujua kama gari imegongwa mbele. Now, hapa mbele gari imelimwa, utaangalia era hapa. Utapata maybe imenyoroshwa. The frame ni hapa ndani. Ukipata maybe gari ilikuwa kwa front impact, utapata hapa ndani wamenyorosha, but they cannot nyorosha it to factory perfection. So unaangalia area hapa na unaangalia hapa, uone kama imejaribu kunyorosha. Hata hapa mbele mahali kuna radiator pia utaona kama imenyoroshwa. Kwa sababu gari imekuwa kwa accident, hapa mbele itakuwa na frontal impact. Utapata hapa maybe imejikunja, lakini unaangalia hata hizi nuts kama zimefungwa vizuri. You can always see something that is welded. But siku hizi kuna kitu inaitwa nose cut na half cut. Siku hizi gari inaweza umia yote, hapa mbele yekwe mpya. Hilo kitu wekeleo mpya. Hiyo tunaita gari ya kuunganisha. So that is how you evaluate a car whether it has been an accident hapa mbele. Apart from checking this line, you can open the trunk and see whether there is a problem. Kama gari lilimwa nyuma, there is a way you can evaluate. Now, the trunk of course should open seamlessly without any problem. Now, this is how the trunk of this car looks like. These are cooler bypass, ile ya watu wa CX5. Now, once you have opened the trunk, you check the underneath. This is where the spare wheel of this car is. Of course, it's a full-size spare wheel. I like it that way. So, you'll check this frame here. It's more of a frame, and this one here. Once you see that maybe it has been welded, it has been corrected, you know that the car was in an accident and it was repaired. For instance, for this one, you can actually see that it's in a very good shape. So that is how you actually check whether a car has been in an accident or not. You check those at the front, you check the lines, you try to open the doors and see whether they open normally and close without a problem. Another thing you should check in terms of the body are the wheels. So you always check the rims and see if they are having any cracks. If they don't have any cracks, you can also check the rubber and see whether it has some good life with it. Of course, in majority of the cars, you're going to replace the rubber once you purchase the car. When you're going to purchase a local used car, you also have to have an open mind. Don't be too ambitious. Don't, of course, expect maximum perfection, especially when you're purchasing a local used car. It's actually very important to ensure that whatever car you are purchasing, it's accident free. Unaweza kuwa unafanya alignment kila siku, but you are still having problem. It's because you bought a car which was in an accident. Maybe the chassis bent. So that is actually why you should actually do a check on the body condition of the car, because unaweza shinda ukifanya alignment lakini bado gari kwa barabara inaenda side moja. Now, if the exterior of the car impresses you, check how the interior looks like. Maybe in the interior, I'm looking at things like the seats, the condition of the seats. You may also want to look at things like the belt, whether they are actually locking pretty well. And then you may also want to look at the dashboard, kama maybe con any scratches ama kupasuka. You may also want to test something like the seal of the car, the gauges here. Kuna gari zenye zikimaliza mafuta uoni, so you also want to test whether the gauge is working properly. You should also try to test the switches, that is the locks on the doors, and try to roll up the windows uone kama zinajifunga vizuri. Usinunue gari alafu unyeshewe njiani. That is something you may also want to consider. Another thing, of course, you may also want to check the infotainment system, maybe the radio, whether it's functioning or not. Basically, the interior, it should be, the accessories at least should be working. That is what actually you are checking in the interior. The condition of the seats, the dashboard here, the steering wheel. Ukiona hapa mbele airbag ili deploy, of course mechanic atakwambia, inakwambia hiyo ni gari accident. Ukiona crack kwa vioo ama windscreen, that should also be something like a red flag. But crack, it's normal. Mtu anaweza kuwa alienda maandamano ama alikuwa anapita kapiwa mawe. That one can be replaced. But that is basically how you check the body's interior. Kitu ya muhimu ni gari kuwa accident free. Uangalie vitu kama hizi, zisikuwe na bend, zisikuwe zimejaribu kunyorosha. Na uangalie uko mbele kama gari imepigwa nose cut ama half cut, na uangalie milango kama inajifunga vizuri. Those are the main things, because don't expect 100% perfection. Utapata gari imekwaruzo kwa sababu maybe it has been locally used na maybe iko imelindwa vizuri. Now, once you've liked everything, sasa ni kuangalia hapa gari mbele, haina leakage chini, so ni kuangalia hapa mbele. Hapa mbele unaweza angalia hapa juu uone kama kuna kitu iko flashed over, maybe kama oil ina splash over. Pia uangalie the level of the fluid. Sasa kama hii ni brake fluid, uone kama iko sawa, power steering fluid. Alafu pia utoe dipstick uangalie the level of the oil. Pia you look at the health of the radiator and the coolant. Uone kama the coolant is to the right level. There is a method I normally use. It's a traditional method to check the suspension of the car. So for instance, you can go where the shocks are. Now this is the right side of this car. You can always try to do something like this one. You can always dance with it this way and then leave it. If it goes back to its original position without any dancing, you know that the shocks are in a very good shape. Of course, that is a traditional way of doing it, but you can always take the car to the road and then see how it's going to respond. You just apply some force on it. Of course, this car is very heavy and I'm just 60 something kilograms, so I may not have any impact. That's why a road test is actually very important. So before going for the road test, there are a couple of things that you can actually do. You can actually, once you turn your ignition key, you should be able to see some warning lights. I'm not sure whether you can see them. There is an engine light here, airbag, oil, battery, they should be there. But immediately you fire up the engine, they should actually disappear. That tells you that the engine is healthy. Now, another thing you can do, before you go for a road test, try shifting the gears from maybe parking to reverse to neutral drive. This is a low range gear 2. If you hear any jerking of the gears, know that, that there is a problem with the transmission. Maybe it may not be a big problem. It may be something like maybe the transmission fluid is low. That's why now you have to take the car to the road and know whether it's a big problem. That is if jerking is there. But this is something you can actually do. Parking, reverse, neutral, driver, 3, 2, L, and see whether there is any problem. If there is any jerking, it can actually point to another problem. You can also try turning the steering wheel and listen whether there is any funny sound that is coming from the steering wheel. If there is any knocking sound or something, it can actually tell you that maybe the steering fluid is low or the steering rack is in its last days. That's why you also have to do a road test to check whether that thing is actually functioning pretty well. Once you fire up the engine, you should also go to the backside of the car and see whether it's actually releasing any funny smokes. Now, if your chemistry teacher was one of the best, you should know that when petrol burns, the combination of petrol and oxygen should be able to result in water and CO2. So ukiweka mkono yako hapa ku exhaust, you realize that it becomes wet. Because if I'm doing this one, I realize that my hand is actually becoming wet. It's because there is some combustion going on up front. Combination of petrol and oxygen is going to return CO2 and water. That's why you should be having some water here or some maybe moisture. When you are going for a road test, there are a couple of things that you want to check out. That's why I always advise that ensure that the radio or sound system is off, because you're going to enjoy that sound system thereafter. But under the road test, you want to listen to the cars, to the engine sound. You want to listen to the gear changes. You want to evaluate something like the suspension noises. So for instance, when you're going to the road, the first thing I always test is that I try to leave the steering wheel and see whether the car will pull to the side. The steering wheel should actually be straight. So this way you can actually tell whether a car has alignment issues. If the car is pulling to the side, it could point to a bunch of possibilities. For instance, alignment is one of them. Sometimes there may be their pressures may not be balanced. And then when you try to gun the car, you are trying to listen to the gear changes. If you hear that the gear changes are a little bit rough, then it tells you that most probably maybe the transmission fluid is low or something. Something bad is happening with the gearbox. That is when there is jerking. Another thing you may also want to learn is that it's very important taking the car to the highway and doing highway speeds. For instance, now I'm doing 100 kilometers per hour. The importance of taking the car or pushing the car to highway speeds is that you want also to listen whether there are other suspension problems. For instance, some cars normally, when a car has a problem, maybe with balancing, maybe a drive shaft has a problem, at high speeds like 100 kilometers per hour, it may tend to vibrate. You may find that the steering wheel is vibrating, which could point to a bunch of possibilities. If the seller tells you to fuel the car, I don't see whether it's a problem fueling a car using 1,000 shillings to take the car to the highway and gunning it properly, because that way, taking the car to the highway and gunning it properly, it's going to expose a bunch of things that maybe will be underlying issues. Now, for instance, if you test a car at 50 kilometers per hour, you may not know anything with those vibrations, which may become about at 100 kilometers per hour, and maybe a car has a bad drive shaft, maybe if there is a problem with wheel balancing. While you are at those highway speeds, if the road allows, you should also try to brake. The car should brake in a straight line. It should not pull to the side or veer off from the lane. So if it does that way, or maybe if it vibrates, it also tells you that there are also a bunch of problems. You also want to see whether the car is going to struggle to make power. For instance, in this car, I easily sit at 100 kilometers per hour with a rev of 2.5. Of course, you understand that this car has a 4-speed gearbox. Of course, if it was a modern car, you can easily sit at 100 kilometers per hour with a rev below 2.5. That is for a petrol car. For a diesel, you can actually get even to 140 with a rev at 1.8. I'm doing this 110 kilometers per hour, and the car is still very settled and relaxed. So if I was in the market and I'm testing a car that is doing 110 kilometers per hour while remaining within its lane without any kind of problem, I think I'll just proceed with that deal. If you test drive a car for maybe 2 kilometers or a short distance and you don't maybe push it hard, it may not bring out any problem that it has. Something like overheating, you have to take a car to the highway, gun it properly like it's stolen. That is how it's going actually to bring out any problem that it has. So that is actually very important, why you should actually take your car to the highway and actually pin it hard, so that it tells you how the alignment looks like, whether it has a smooth gearbox, the engine health, whether it's actually struggling to make power. So that is the importance of doing a proper road test. When you've done the road test and maybe you are back, you still have to check the car, because you've taken the car to the highway and maybe you've stressed it to high speeds, maybe 140, 120. You have tried maybe to expose or bring out any underlying issue. You have to recheck the car again. So basically, you're going to check underneath the car and see whether there are any leakages. Another thing you may want to check is that how the upfront looks like. If maybe you open your trunk after the road test and you find that the coolant is actually boiling in the reservoir, that could point to a bunch of possibilities. For instance, I've done quite a number of pre-purchase inspection on Mazdas, especially the CX-5 diesel. Immediately you open the reservoir, maybe after the road test, and then you find that the coolant is actually boiling all over in the reservoir. That should point to a bunch of possibilities, including a head gasket that is actually gone wrong. Nowadays, these cars are actually very computerized and they have a gazillion of sensors. See, kama hii gari, of course, these are not sensors, but see mingi. This is a diagnosis machine. It's called Autel 909 Pro. It's an expensive machine because bei yake ni same na something like a Toyota 110 or a well-kept Toyota 100. Now, this diagnosis machine, it's actually very important. You plug it on the OBD port here, and then you try to scan every problem. This one actually it's a very powerful machine, and it can actually scan up to 2024 models. EPA inaweza scan even Scanias. When you are using this computer for diagnosis, it is going to extract any problem that the car has which is underlying. Gari inaweza kuwa vizuri sahi, but after a problem, after a while, it may actually bring out problems. So the importance of doing machine diagnosis is that it's going to extract and give you some insight on how the car looks like in the near future. So that immediately you purchase the car, you don't go actually into earlier repairs in the near future. For instance, if you're purchasing a Subaru Forester, SJG or a SJ5, yenye maybe kona gearbox issue, the machine will actually tell you whether a solenoid has a problem or it's something to do with the valve body of that transmission. Nowadays, you don't just repair cars using a trial and error guesswork. Once you do that diagnosis, it can actually tell you where the exact problem is, and it will actually save your cost. Usianze sijui kununua steering rack na maybe gari ilikuwa sawa. Usianze sijui kununua vitu zenye maybe zenye hazina shida, uanze kuzijaza kwa nyumba. Of course, in the past, I've seen people tell me that they have bought parts and they realize those are not the parts. Hata gearbox, nimeona watu wamechange gearbox na after mega gearbox mpya bado anagundua this problem is reoccurring. So that's why you need to do that diagnosis test. After you've been impressed with the car's condition, it's driving well, the body is okay, everything is literally okay, the next process whereby you are going to is called due diligence. In this case, you want to see where the car is properly registered. Now, this is actually a logbook. This is a logbook of this car, KBK 568K. It has the register's owners, bill CO2, the details of the car, the engine capacity, the make, the model, the year of manufacture. Now, you're going to check the details on this logbook versus what is on the car. But before you do that, you should do an NTSA vehicle search. An NTSA vehicle search is going to cost you 550 shillings. Now, once you do that vehicle search, you're going to get some result. Now, once you have that NTSA vehicle search result, and you have the logbook view, and you have the car with you, now you're going to check whether the details on all the three platforms are going to tally. For instance, let's start with something like the chassis number. Now, let's look at something like the chassis number of this car. Now for this car, actually in very many cars, you're going to realize that the chassis number is somewhere here. For instance, this one is a GX115 and some detail thereafter, and on the logbooks it's a GX115. You're going to see whether this number inaingiana na yenye iko hapa. Kwa gari zingine kama Mazda, hizi the new Mazdas, utapata chassis number iko hapa kwa mlango, on the door. Kama gari kama Subaru Forester, you'll find it on the left door. Gari zingine pia hapa kwa driver's mat hapo chini, ukifungua hapo utaona something written VIN. VIN basically is an abbreviation for vehicle identification number. Hiyo ndo chassis number. So utaipata hapo. So that is actually something you're going to check. Next, it's something like the engine number. So engine number may actually be at different locations depending on the car. Something like this car, the number is actually at a very hidden place. I may not be able to show you in this video, but I can show you in person. Something like a Mazda, it's actually the easiest. Ukimulika kwa Mazda uweke torch, you can actually see the engine number. Something like a Subaru Forester, maybe it's something like the SJG, immediately ukitoa ile cover ya juu yenye imeandikwa DIT, hapo ndani utaona engine number hapo. So those are the things you should check. The chassis number must match on all the three platforms, on the logbook, on the NTSA vehicle result, and on the car. Hiyo haina shortcut, but the engine number may vary. The reason is an engine may have a problem and you may replace it. But then ukienda kuangalia gari upate engine number zingienda yenye kwa gari, the owner should be able to prove with the documentation. That one should not be a problem. So, but for the chassis number, it has to match. So that is called due diligence. And then another thing, hapa chini you're seeing something like registered owners kwa logbook. So the registered owners here should be the registered owners on the NTSA platform, because those are the people that are going to transfer the car to you immediately after purchase. So don't buy a car from maybe Peter and the owner here is written Bill CO2, because after the purchase you're going to look for Bill CO2 to do the transfer to you, unless and otherwise maybe that Peter has authority to sell. Once you've done the road test, it's okay. You've checked the car's documentation, everything is telling. The next part is actually payment. Now, how do you pay? Now, once that you have agreed with the seller in terms of the pricing, you should have all those details indicated on a sales agreement. Basically, a sales agreement has details like the seller, the buyer, the witnesses, the make and model of the car, the engine capacity, the price with which you've agreed for the car, the amount you're going to pay, whether there is any balance. All those details are actually captured on a sales agreement. You can actually have an advocate or a lawyer draft that one for you. But if you're working from a showroom, they'll be having ready drafts of the sales agreement. Now, how do you pay? Never ever pay money in cash. Usiende kununua gari na maybe umebeba pesa na bahasha, because you cannot be able to prove that you paid for the car. So that's why it's actually very important maybe to pay via bank, M-Pesa, Money Link, all those things. Something that you can actually be able to verify thereafter, and something maybe you can have a receipt to attach to the sales agreement. So that is how you pay for the car. Now, after umelipia gari, the next step is called vehicle transfer. A buyer is normally responsible to foot the bill for vehicle transfer. The fees are actually dependent on the engine capacity of the car. The higher the capacity, the more the fees. For instance, these are 2000 cc. These are 2000 cc car. So the fees for transferring this car will be around 3,400. If it's going to be a 2.5 or a 3 liter, the charges are actually going to be higher than these ones. Once you wire the transfer fees to the seller, they are going to initiate a transfer on their NTSA platform. Once they initiate a transfer, you are going to log in from your end as the buyer to actually accept. After you've completed the process of purchase, the car has been transferred to you. It's good manners that you ensure that you have your own insurance. You can tell the dealer to cancel theirs, so that you can initiate the process and ensure that your car is covered because of any eventualities outside there. Immediately you get your insurance cover and maybe you drive away, you can choose to go and maybe do a full service on the car. A full service basically will include checking the brake pads and the fluids, maybe changing the oil, and ensure that you start your interval. It's not recommended that you work with the dealer's word, They may be telling you that the car is some kilometers or miles to the next interval, but it's good manners that you start your own interval or maybe your own setting, so that you can be able to learn how the car looks like in terms of something like fuel consumption. So change the oils, check the spark plugs, brake pads, and start your circle of ownership. I think I've exhausted, or I've done my level best to tell you how to purchase a locally used car. Of course, I know I've left out quite a number of things, but of course I wanted this video not to be extremely long. If you have a question about some part, or literally how to go about the purchase of a local used car or a new one, you can always get in touch with us on the number below. If you also want to purchase a car, you can task us to get the right car for you, because we scout clean cars, ensure that they are in a good shape, such that your car ownership journey becomes easy. That is the goal of 0 to 60 motoring. Alright guys, if you found this content helpful, remember to subscribe to this channel, and you can also share this video to your friends. That is how you'll help this platform grow. Bye for now. I'll see you on the next one on 0 to 60 motoring.